The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. It fell against the windows of the small craftsman house on Mercer Island like a quiet accusation, constant, cold, and familiar. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, a mug of black coffee cooling between his palms, watching the gray blur of Seattle through the glass. Something felt wrong. He couldn't name it yet, but it was there, a tremor beneath the surface of their routine life. Claire was late. It wasn't unusual for her to stay behind after work. She was a project coordinator for an architecture firm downtown, often caught in late meetings or team dinners. But tonight, the clock said 9:17, and her phone had gone straight to voicemail. Daniel's thumb hovered over the screen again, her contact photo, smiling in sunlight from some trip years ago. He didn't press call this time. Instead, he listened to the rain and the house, too quiet, too neat, too still. Even the dog, Jasper, hadn't moved from the couch since dinner. When the headlights finally swept across the driveway, Daniel didn't rush to the window. He just waited. The front door opened softly, and Claire stepped inside, shaking water from her coat, her dark hair clinging to her face. "Hey," she said lightly, as if the night were nothing special. "God, traffic was awful." Daniel glanced up. Traffic? On a Friday night? She hesitated just long enough for him to notice. Then she smiled, that soft, deliberate smile she always used when she wanted to redirect a conversation. "Yeah. There was a wreck on I-90. Took forever." He studied her for a moment. Her cheeks were flushed, not from cold, but from something else. Her makeup slightly smudged, her lipstick uneven. He noticed the faint scent of cologne, not his. Claire moved toward the counter, setting her purse down too quickly, like she wanted to get the moment over with. "You already ate?" "Yeah," Daniel said quietly. "Left you some pasta." "Thanks," she murmured, avoiding his gaze. He watched her move through the kitchen, precise, careful. Everything about her was measured now. Even the way she breathed. He wanted to believe it was exhaustion, stress, maybe a rough week at work. But the feeling that something was shifting, breaking, grew heavier in his chest. When she finally looked at him, her eyes softened. "You're staring, babe." "Just missed you," he said. It was true, and it hurt. That night, when she fell asleep beside him, Daniel stayed awake, listening to the rain and the rhythm of her breathing. He wanted to believe it was still the same woman beside him, the one he'd married 9 years ago, the one who used to fall asleep with her hand resting on his chest. But even in the dark, he could feel it. She wasn't really there. The next morning, Seattle woke to its usual gray. Thin mist hung over the neighborhood, softening the sharp edges of houses and cars. Daniel stood at the sink, rinsing his coffee mug, while Claire moved behind him, already dressed for work, black slacks, a cream blouse, hair tied in a low knot. She looked composed, professional, and distant. "You're heading in early?" he asked, glancing at the clock. 7:10 a.m. She usually left at 8. "Yeah," she said, grabbing her keys. "We've got a client meeting at 9. I want to get there before everyone else." Daniel nodded slowly. "Want me to drive you?" "I'm going downtown later anyway." She froze for half a second, a pause so small most people wouldn't have noticed it. Then she smiled, casual, controlled. "That's sweet, but don't worry about it. You just get stuck in traffic. I'll take the train." The train. She'd never taken the train before. He watched her go, the sound of her heels clicking across the wood floor, the door closing softly behind her, the faint scent of perfume that lingered in the air like smoke after a candle flame. Something inside him twisted. At work, Daniel tried to focus, spreadsheets, numbers, emails, but his mind wandered. Every time his phone buzzed, he expected a text from her. None came. By noon, he gave up pretending to concentrate. He found himself opening their shared calendar, she'd made it years ago, to stay organized together. There it was, her usual schedule: client call, site visit, design review. But something didn't fit. The site visit location was blank. Normally, she added the address. This time, nothing. It wasn't proof. It wasn't even much of a clue. But in marriage, the smallest omissions feel like cracks in glass. That evening, she came home late again. Daniel was sitting on the couch, laptop open but untouched. The TV flickered without sound. When she walked in, she looked radiant, her cheeks glowing, her hair loosened from the knot, her eyes bright in a way that didn't belong to exhaustion. "Hey, you're up," she said. "I thought you'd be in bed." He smiled faintly. "Couldn't sleep." She kicked off her shoes and came over, curling into the armchair across from him. "Long day." "I'm starving." "You eat yet?" He shook his head. "Was waiting for you." Claire's gaze flicked toward the kitchen. "Let me change. I'll make something quick." She stood, turned, and as she did, her phone slipped from her bag and hit the floor. The screen lit up before she grabbed it. A name flashed. Evan M. Her hand moved fast, too fast, as she scooped it up. Daniel didn't say anything. He just looked at her, steady, unblinking. She smiled, small and strained. "Work message." He nodded. "Sure." And for a few seconds, neither of them moved. The rain outside thickened, hitting the windows like static. When she finally walked away, Daniel sat perfectly still, the name burned into his mind. Evan M. He didn't know who that was. But he was going to find out. That night, he waited until she fell asleep. Then, quietly, he reached for her phone on the nightstand. It was locked, of course. Face ID. Passcode. Both out of reach. But when he pressed the power button, the background photo appeared, the two of them at Cannon Beach, Oregon, 3 summers ago. He remembered how happy she looked that day. The memory felt cruel now, like a lie they'd both agreed to tell. He set the phone back gently, rolled onto his back, and stared into the dark. He wasn't angry yet. Just afraid. Afraid that the truth was already here, whispering through the cracks of their quiet little house, waiting for him to finally listen. By Monday morning, Daniel's unease had hardened into something else, a quiet, steady determination. He wasn't the jealous type. Never had been. But after nearly a decade of marriage, you learn to read a person's silence as clearly as their words. Claire's silences had changed. She used to fill them with laughter, with warmth. Now they were sharp and evasive, stitched together with too much thought. At work, Daniel couldn't stop replaying that name, Evan M. He opened a new browser tab. His fingers hovered over the keys. He felt ridiculous, like some paranoid husband in a bad TV drama, but curiosity won. He typed Evan M. Architecture Seattle. It took less than a minute. Evan Mercer, Senior Designer, Westfield and Lowe Architects. The same firm where Claire worked. Daniel clicked the staff photo. The man was mid-30s, fit, confident, sharp jawline, the kind of smile that seemed practiced. There was something about him that screamed too charming for his own good. Daniel stared at the image for a long time. Then he closed the browser and rubbed his temples. It didn't mean anything yet. Not really. But the thought settled in his stomach like a weight. That evening, when Claire came home, she was cheerful. Too cheerful. "Guess what," she said, setting her bag down. "We landed the new Bayview contract. Huge project." "That's great," he said carefully. "You and your team." "Yeah," she said. "Evan and I pulled some long nights getting the proposal right. But it paid off." She said his name so casually, so naturally, that it almost disarmed him. Almost. Daniel forced a smile. "Evan Mercer, right? You've mentioned him before." Her hands paused mid-motion, the tiniest hitch as she unpacked her laptop. Then she nodded. Yeah, Evan. He's good at what he does. He wanted to believe her tone was neutral. But he'd lived with her long enough to hear the faint note of affection buried underneath. 2 days later, Daniel left work early. He told his boss he wasn't feeling well, drove to a small cafe near Claire's office, and parked where he had a clear view of the street. Rain drizzled across the windshield, soft and relentless. He watched people come and go, briefcases, umbrellas, tired faces. Around 6:10, the glass doors of Westfield and Low opened. Claire walked out. She wasn't alone. Evan was beside her, tall, laughing about something. He held the door for her, a gesture too familiar, too comfortable. She touched his arm briefly as she stepped out. Just a light brush of her hand. But Daniel saw it. They crossed the street together, heading toward the corner restaurant. Not co-workers in a rush, not people hurrying to catch a train, just two people enjoying each other. Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. He wanted to start the car. Drive up. Confront them. But he didn't. He just watched, his hands trembling on the steering wheel, rain streaking down the glass like tears he refused to shed. After a few minutes, they disappeared inside the restaurant, the Olive Branch, a cozy Italian place. He knew it. They'd eaten there together once, for their 5th anniversary. The irony was unbearable. He stayed parked there for nearly an hour. When she finally emerged, it was alone. She looked at her phone, typed something quickly, then walked toward the train station. Daniel followed her at a distance, his heart hammering. He wasn't a man built for suspicion or revenge, but love can turn gentle people into detectives. When they got home, she smiled at him like nothing had happened. Hey, babe. You okay? You look tired. Yeah, he said. Just a long day. He wanted to tell her he'd seen everything. He wanted to scream. But instead, he kissed her forehead and whispered, I missed you. Because sometimes, silence is more dangerous than confrontation. That night, while she showered, Daniel opened her laptop. He wasn't proud of it. But pride didn't matter anymore. He clicked through folders, documents, until one caught his eye, Bayview_proposal_final.docs. He opened it. The file was filled with architectural renderings, notes, annotations, and comments in the margin. Let's meet tomorrow night to go over revisions. Same place. EM. Sure. I'll bring my notes. 7 works. CW. His stomach turned. Same place. He didn't know where that was yet. But he would. Daniel closed the laptop just as she stepped out of the bathroom, towel wrapped around her hair, steam following her like a ghost. You okay? She asked, smiling. He forced a breath. Yeah. Just checking emails. She crossed to him, leaned down, kissed his cheek, and for the first time in 9 years, he didn't kiss her back. It was almost midnight when Daniel finally knew. The truth didn't come like a shock. It arrived quietly, steady, cold, and absolute, like the rain outside their house. He had followed her that evening. Not for proof, he already had enough, but for clarity, for that final, merciless confirmation that ends all denial. Claire had said she was meeting a client about the Bayview project. She left wearing a dark coat and her favorite perfume, the one she only wore on anniversaries. Daniel followed at a distance, his headlights dimmed, his heart a drumbeat of fury and disbelief. Downtown Seattle glowed with reflections, streetlights and puddles, neon signs bending in the mist. He parked across from the Winslow Hotel, a place far too expensive for a client meeting. At 8:03, she walked through the doors. At 8:05, Evan followed. No briefcase. No laptop. Just a smile that Daniel would never forget. He waited in the car for nearly an hour, rain pounding the windshield like a heartbeat. The city moved around him, taxis, laughter, the hum of late-night life, but he was somewhere else entirely, trapped between rage and heartbreak. At 9:17, he got out. The hotel lobby smelled of orchids and polished wood. A pianist played softly near the bar. The receptionist barely looked up when Daniel walked past, his expression cold, controlled, unreadable. He took the elevator to the 6th floor. He didn't know how he knew, but when he saw the cleaning cart parked beside room 614, he stopped. He could hear faint music through the door. A woman's laugh, light, familiar. Claire's. Something inside him cracked open. He pressed his forehead against the door, just once, breathing hard. Then he stepped back, slid his wedding ring from his finger, and set it gently on the carpet. He didn't knock. He didn't storm in. He simply turned and walked away. When Claire came home the next morning, Daniel was gone. No note. No message. Just absence, thick and heavy as fog. His clothes were still in the closet, his toothbrush still by the sink, but he wasn't there. She called him 6 times. He didn't answer. By noon, she found the ring. He'd left it on the kitchen table, next to her coffee cup. Beneath it was a folded page, a printed email. It was one of her own, sent weeks ago. Same place. 7 Works. CW. Below it, Daniel had written in pen. I know. I hope he was worth everything we built. She sank into the chair, shaking. The world around her blurred, the hum of the fridge, the rain outside, the silence of the home they'd made together. For the first time, she realized that she'd lost something permanent. Not just Daniel, but the version of herself that used to love him honestly. 3 months later, Daniel filed for divorce. He'd moved to Portland by then, taking a new job, living in a small apartment overlooking the Willamette River. He ran every morning, cooked simple meals, and tried to forget the sound of her voice. One evening, as the rain began again, the same rhythm that had always followed them, he opened his phone and looked at their last photo together. She was laughing, sunlight in her hair, her hand resting on his shoulder. He stared for a long time, then deleted it. Outside, the river moved quietly, reflecting the city lights, steady, unstoppable. Claire never remarried. She stayed in Seattle, alone in the house they'd bought together. Sometimes, she still caught herself setting out 2 cups of coffee in the morning before remembering there was no one else to drink the second. The affair with Evan ended quickly, as such things always do. It wasn't love, just an escape from something she never tried to fix. Now, when the rain came and pressed against the windows, she would whisper into the empty air, "I'm sorry." But the rain never answered.